drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Good evening once again, and welcome to another Doctor on Call. And first, we do apologize for the late start. It was due to circumstances beyond our control. All right, so we again apologize for that. We welcome all our viewers on GBN Television 7911, our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, and of course our listeners on K105 FM. This evening, we have quite an interesting program for you. We'll be looking at the new adolescent health policy, and we will be joined, of course, by Dr. Nixon. She's always here, but we have two very special guests, Dr. Sonia Frame, and she's no stranger to the program, so she's here with us tonight. And also joining us, Denoj Alexis, and she is the PRO of the Youth Advocacy Movement. All right, so we will be chatting a lot. In fact, Dr. Nixon will be leading this evening, so let's go straight to them and welcome them all. Dr. Nixon, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Godfrey. Good evening, Grenada, and all our friends in the diaspora. And then my special good evening to my seniors who wait up for us to talk. So good evening, everyone. Still crazy season, Carnival. Godfrey, I thought of you on Sunday so much when I was looking at the videos and saw the Carnival, the Jab group just grew, growing and more children. Interestingly, I want to applaud Kirk Ceterhall, who made a post today on his Facebook page about indecency and exposure by adults exposing their genitals, and he was not kind to them, and I want to congratulate him for being candid about it, because Carnival is supposed to be something for all families, and if you're going to go there as an adult, male or female, to expose your genitals, you probably need to just stay home in your toilet. Unfortunately, we have lost boundaries, and if you cannot keep the boundaries, you just don't belong to this Carnival thing. I'm sorry. So I want to thank Kirk. So today we've lost some time, and we want to look at adolescent health. Now, there's a policy that was done in 2023, and we're going to talk about this tonight, particularly because there are you would hear a lot of discussion related to adolescent, one component of adolescent health, but we want to look at a whole. In looking at the legal framework, we need to understand why how the policy came about, why we think we need to change the legal environment in which the policy is going to be implemented. Because the bottom line is that our adolescent population is probably almost 20%. 10 to 19 is our adolescent group, right? Our adolescent group in Grenada. That's how we define an adolescence, as those in 10 to 19 age group. There are demands made on the Sustainable Development Goal in 3 and 5 and other areas that address the well-being of our young people, both health-wise, employment, development, education. So our adolescent population is very important, and we must look at all the things that enhance them being the best adults. So in 2023, Dr. Frame, and that's part of the reason why she's here, she developed, she worked with the local authorities to develop this policy, and so that's one of her reasons for being here, because I think she's probably one of the most instructive persons to speak on adolescent health, because she's done so much work. Before I go into my long thing, I'm gonna introduce Dr. Frame, that, like you say, is no stranger to us. She's been with us on big topics like climate change. When we were looking at the challenges to chronic diseases, she was there on those two occasions. And every so often we call her. But Dr. Frame is an assistant professor at the Department of Public Health under which this whole adolescent health comes, and preventative medicine. Very important participant in this whole discussion to give us the view. How do we look at it from a public health standpoint to ensure that our adolescents' health is preserved, is made the very best, is optimized. So Dr. Frame is one of our guests. And Dr. Frame, let me introduce you quickly, and you can say hello, and then we're gonna go back to do our thing. And then she has a guest with her, a young lady, as you introduced, and she would introduce her young guest.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity this evening, Mr. Augustine and Dr. Nixon. It's nice to be back. I've been on a nice little hiatus from the program, but it's always nice to sit and chit chat here with you all. I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. Topics near and dear to my heart, and I think a lot is happening on the ground that we can kind of stick our teeth into for some rich discussions.
Yes, indeed.
Please introduce a young lady.
So with me tonight is a very special guest. We have the young Dinoj Alexis, who is the PRO, Public Relations Officer of the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association's Youth Advocacy Movement. They've been on the ground, they've been busy getting lots of information and education out to our young people, as is their mission. So Dinoj, welcome to the program. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, so I guess you're going to do most of the work tonight, Dinoj, because it's a young people thing.
I guess so. Let's find out.
No, but guess what? Your input is important, because this is about, you can't have public policy and interventions and whatever it is without having the people who are affected directly. So thank you for your time being. So Grenada's adolescent health policy was developed in 2023. Dr. Prim is going to tell you who was there, because it was a very wide cross-section of stakeholders participating in a lot of work. I remember being there, and it was a whole lot of work trying to really hone in on what was important for our adolescents, inclusive. There were young people, a lot of young people there. It aims to improve the well-being of young people through various initiatives, including strengthening community health infrastructure, integrating mental health and substance abuse programs, promoting healthy lifestyle. It also focuses on preventing non-communicable diseases, NCDs, and ensuring access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health services. Okay, one of the impact of the integration of sexual and reproductive health services, one key aspect, is integrating sexual and reproductive health and HIV services. That's a thought, right? But along we must also address gender inequalities and promoting human rights. The truth is, if we're going to build on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we're going to have to be like our peers are out there in the rest of the world, our neighbors in the rest of this global environment, this global village, okay, where we all should be on par as far as possible as far as development goes, right? And this adolescent health policy, it's more than time that it be implemented, because think about it. You remember, Godfrey, we speaking about our children getting access to care. Yeah, you have to go to the doctor until you're 4 years old and get your shots. After that, you cannot on your own, right? We don't even have a situation where children have to do health checks, not even annual health checks, right? Before starting school in the year. There's no obligatory checks. At 12, the nurse with the brown uniform who makes everybody cry comes around the school, or your parents take you and you get your booster shots, and it's done. But we're seeing today that there are a lot of challenges that our young people have. One, we see an early onset of NCDs, of non-communicable chronic diseases, right? Hypertension, diabetes, obesity, and increased cholesterol levels, the things that bring on long-standing diseases even earlier. And there are a lot of reasons we can say why. Economic, there are different different reasons, different areas that we can visit to see what are the contributing factors, whether it's economic, whether it is commercial, whether it is social. What are the factors that contribute towards us having the diseases that we have? We have to pretend, but we cannot leave our adolescent population out, because guess what? This is our next generation of providers. This is probably our most dynamic. The other thing is we are challenged that population is also decreasing, and the population is decreasing because we, like everywhere else in the world, we have decreased families having less children. I don't know why my jargon is leaving me tonight. Okay, we have the decreased number of children in our families, whether we're using contraceptives or not, whether it is economic, whether people just choose not to, whatever the reason, whether we have migration, whether people are more focused on education, whatever it is, we know that we're having less children than we did. So whereas your grandmother would have had 8 children, some of us don't even have 1.5 or half. Okay, the averages have really dropped. And Grenada is already in that situation where we have less children, or fertility rates are less than are required to maintain and to sustain our social security state. Okay? And some of the components of this policy, and I'm going to ask Dr. Frame to go through it because I wanted to start from the top. But strengthen community health. Where does national health insurance fit into all of this? Where does the issue of health in all policies come in? Because there's a thing called health in all policy, which we talk about later, that we tend to forget. And when we speak of the sustainable development goals, we see where you must have health within your education policy as much as you have education within your health policy. You must have health within your agricultural policies as much as your agricultural policy should see, are we providing sufficient nutritious food for our children? Health within sports, whatever it is, they must contain those components of health, and specifically focusing in this case on our adolescents. Mental health and substance abuse, nutrition, like we said. Looking at disabilities, how do we implement the whole concept of inclusiveness so that our adolescents with disability can achieve their maximum, that they can have access to care, that the access to care means that not just physical access that you can get into the building, but whatever you require is made available for you. Looking at gender inequalities and making sure that the care we give them are evidence-based, making sure that there's an age of consent and access to services. That's one of the things. How do we engage the community in ensuring that our young people get the care they require? And of course, we talked about substance use before, and that's going to always come up as a problem because we know that our adolescents are at the greatest risk for use of substances. We talk all the time about vaping and other things. Who smokes weed? And I know that we think they're going to legalize the use of marijuana. So those are the challenges. Those are some of the challenges and some of the things. So Dr. Frame, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask you a couple questions and you're going to explain it first. We know that the policy was done. The other policy was done like in 2010 or something like that. And why did we need a new adolescent health policy? And what are the steps we took that were taken to ensure that we had a comprehensive and time-worthy and timely, something that represents the era in which we live? What are the steps that we took to ensure? I'm going to ask other questions about this, right? But talk to us about developing this new policy. Why did we think we needed a new health policy? And what is it that we think? How do we make it come about?
So the policy was developed because there's a move across the region. So this is not a standalone thing for Grenada, but regionally, there is a move to strengthen approaches to dealing with adolescent health because we recognize the value of adolescence and how what is done and what happens during adolescence, how it affects not just their lives currently, but also how it affects their future as well as how it affects the next generation. And so one of the things that you hear, Dr. Nixon talks about health in all policy, but we can also talk about a life course approach, which means that if we think about the lifespan, right, we think about from birth, or maybe we start to think about it from birth, but it starts much earlier, right? And then what happens at each stage, different stage of the life course or the lifespan, affects subsequent stages. So what a mother eats, how she treats her body, the state of her health affects the state of her child's health, right? The fetus health. It affects the baby's health. Then how the baby is raised and the access that it has to good health services and so on. That affects the baby's health, but also how now that child develops into an adolescent and their health, and what happens with them, how it affects their health as an adult. And as an adult, what they do and their behaviors and everything, that affects their health as they get older. They become an elderly person and so on until death. So it's the cycle, right? And so that's really important, because I think Grenada had an adolescent policy developed in 2013. There was very limited implementation of that policy. I also participated in the development of that policy. And with limited implementation, as well as seeing that the burden of disease, the burden of illness, the burden of mortality, what is killing us and is making us sick, is chronic non-communicable diseases, as I know Dr. Nixon talks about often on this program. And so at that time, that adolescent policy, in my view as the person who led that process, didn't account so much for how much chronic diseases and so on was important in the health and lives of adolescents as we look towards the future in addressing and really curbing these chronic conditions. So the diabetes, the hypertension, the cancers, the heart disease, all of those things, right? So the policy needed a bit of an updating. But I think also since 2013, many years had passed, and so we needed to re-engage. We had many different actors in terms of government actors, but stakeholders on the ground as well, right? We have a new generation of young people. So I think there was really need to update that policy. And so the policy was developed. Dr. Nixon mentioned a new approach. I think maybe what was really new about it was the level of engagement. Typically, we do the one-day stakeholder consultation initially, and then maybe a validation towards the end. In this instance, we had multiple engagements with a cross-section of stakeholders, including healthcare providers, your policymakers. We had a number of young people who participated as well
educators.
Yes, educators. We had people from drug control. But in addition to that, there was a lot of data collected from the various stakeholders to give us a good view of the kinds of issues that were affecting adolescents. So I think the policy was developed being very informed. It's not that the previous policy was uninformed, but I think it needed to be updated to account for our current situation.
So you mentioned implementation, and I think we're at implementation's door. We've had this policy for at least a year and a half, and we're at implementation door. Well, you didn't mention who the stakeholders I was going to ask, but I think let's look at some of the components, okay? Before we go into implementation, I just want you to expand a little. Strengthen community health. Why is that important to adolescent health currently?
So So when you talk about community health, let's put that in terms of primary health care. Yes, I think terms that we've used before. So our health centers, our medical stations, essentially what is happening at the community level. And so that level is,
and private practice, your GP.
and your general practitioners in private practice. Because when it comes to adolescents, in fact, your private providers are extremely important, right? Because there are a number of barriers that adolescents face in accessing your public providers, particularly if they want to access those services on their own for very sensitive and private things that we don't want to talk about. No fault of the adolescents, right? But just culturally and socially, there's this big silence and taboo. And we know there's a lot of issues around confidentiality or lack of confidentiality to access these services. So whether or not we want to hide and talk about it like it's a secret, we all know it's in the public domain, there is an issue with confidentiality, right? So let's just put it out there and talk about it. So, but at the same time, there are also a lot of good things that are happening within the health system. So let's take both of these things and not just try to take the negative on its own, right? So there's a level of comfort that the general population have for private providers. This is not unique to adolescents, but because adolescents face some unique barriers to accessing public services, the private sector is really important for that population. But the key about the community level or primary health care is that it is close to where people live and where people work. Now, in very small countries like ours, islands like ours, where everybody knows one another, that is a kind of double-edged sword, right? Because then that kind of helps to perpetuate the whole conversations around the challenges of the lack of confidentiality. Because you know, if an adolescent shows up to their community health center without their parents in particular, right, there's a good chance, and they've said this, numerous studies have talked about this. I've done research where they've told me this. Even in developing this policy, they've talked about this, that by the time you leave the health center, sometimes even
your mother know.
Your mother know, right? Or your cousin or whomever has some kind of relation or friendship with somebody working in the health center. They know that you were there and why you were there, right? And that, I know we'll get to the more sensitive topics, but for some health issues or reasons why adolescents access the health facilities that are of the most sensitive nature, that practice can be very problematic for adolescents. It prevents them from going to seek the service when they need it, which means that are they going to do without the service, or are they or is it going to stop them from doing what they were planning to do in the first instance, right? And so the help that they needed, what is going to happen? They're going to forego the help. They won't have access to the help. And we are literally pushing them in harm's way, right? And I think that is a form of neglect and irresponsibility on our part as a society.
So even further than that, I think we should include here the fact that the world, and especially developing countries, are moving to developing, improving health services at the community, because prevention is the way to go. So if our adolescents, that very important part, those very important components, individuals in our community do not have access to preventative health care, whatever they consider preventative, because we as adults probably don't understand, just being able to talk to somebody about, every time I eat cheese, my acne breaks out. I'm just saying. Something as simple and banal as that.
Mm-hmm.
But, that they can go and have a space. Remember, we talked about creating adolescent clinics where they know that is their space and they know that there's confidentiality. But not only that, they know that there is professionalism, but people are also instructed to know how to manage adolescents' problems, because they are adolescents are a special population. They have their own psychological existence. We ask them to be adults, most of us, because most of the kids who are adolescents already taking care of themselves on their own. But we ask them to be able to be fluent in expressing whatever situation they have. But their language is theirs. Okay, their language is theirs. Their experiences are theirs. It's nothing like if you're a parent or if you're a 4-year-old. And so they need to have people who understand what their needs are and who can communicate and who can be. We're not even going to talk about confidentiality even more, because that is very important. And so much so, when we can give them the confidence that confidentiality is fine, that they don't have a problem coming in, because I can go in there and talk about any problem that I have. And so that's one of the biggest things, and ensuring that we have appropriately developed community health. That is one of the things that this policy really looks at. Our adolescents being able to say, boy, this shoe burn my foot and I get a blister, I'm going and see it. Something similar, or this guy has been pressuring me to have intercourse and I need to talk to somebody about this, right? Or my friends, everybody been smoking. I went to this party and they gave me stuff to drink and I don't like how I feel. Whatever it is, that is because those are their problems, okay? That they can find a place, and so now that we're talking about developing primary health care, there must be that like a space that belongs to them and to them alone.
Right. And that's an important point. Yeah, because that's something that came from them, right? I think too often, and we have Dinaj here and she can speak more, but what young people say is important. I think as a culture, we are very familiar and very comfortable with children should be seen and not heard. And that translates to they don't have a voice, right? So do as I say, but not as I do. Do as I tell you to do. Follow my instructions. Don't ask questions, right? But especially, so we can make the distinction, right? The distinction between small children who, let's say, early primary school children, but very quickly, children get out of this stage, right? And they're thinking, they're exploring, they're discovering. That's the nature of children, right? When you get to adolescence is a fantastic stage of new discovery, but it's also an experimental stage. And I remember having a wonderful adolescence, and I know a group of young people in the youth advocacy movement who are also having a wonderful period of adolescence. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't come with some troubles and some challenges. But it doesn't mean that is all it is made up of, or most of it is made up of this. When you look at young people, we always talk about the ills of young people, and they're not doing this, and they're not doing that, and they're not doing the other. But have we taken a close look at the majority of the young people in Grenada? They are fantastic, right? And they have so much going for them. So I think we have to give them credit. They're living this experience. Just think about when they go off to school, whether they go to TAMCC or they're in secondary school, they spend, just as parents spend 8 and 10 hours at work, these young people are at school for all of these hours. Parents
making decisions, making important decisions. Yeah.
Right? So we have to trust, at some point, we have to trust that they are not stupid. They have a brain, and all the things that we're trying to teach them at home. And I'm talking to myself as a parent with this as well, because sometimes I need this talk, right? That they hear us, that they understand, right? And they will make mistakes. but they do have, it's called agency. In my line of work, this is called agency, right? They can make decisions, and they're resilient, which means that they can bounce back when things go wrong, whether it's by coming and talking to you for advice or they just want you to listen, right? And so while I say this is also part of the framework that we used to develop this policy. Because it's not, adolescent health is big and broad, right? Dr. Nixon also always says, when you think about adolescent health, all people think about is sex, right? It's sexual and reproductive health. But adolescent health is big and broad. It's about lots of different things. It's about mental health. It's about alcohol and drug use. It's about nutrition. It's about
mental health.
Yes, of course. It's about all of these things. So it's thinking about the definition of health, right? When we think about adolescent health, it applies to them as well. Their mental and emotional well-being, their physical well-being, all of that is taken into account, right? The relationships that they have with their parents, with their friends, with their teachers, right? With society as a whole. How connected do they feel to the place where they live and the people that they engage? Think about when we malign young people in society. We talk about, oh, this girl is no good because she wearing short pants and all, she breast exposed and all these things, right? They don't feel connected to us when we talk about them in that way. They don't feel connected to their communities when we talk about them in that way, right? They feel disconnected. And so then they place less value on what adults say and what communities say. And then we open the door, we put a bigger crack, we create a crevice, right?
And they feel targeted.
Of course, for them to do all the kinds of things that we don't want them to do. And this is not just about girls, but the boys as well. He puts a little locks in his hair. We say, oh, what he's smoking now.
Weed, no,
he's smoking weed and all them kinds of things. Right?
Drugs.
Poor young man. He's just exploring his identity and trying to find himself as a young person, right? But so that brings us to the safety and the supportive environment. Young people need to feel safe in their environments, in their various environments, to thrive.
Which is what I was going to say, because if we can create that safe space, just look at how well adjusted our young population is going to become, knowing that, no judgment here. Let me go see what's going on in here, right? And the more we provide these spaces, the more they will access the spaces, and the more developed they will become, the more independent, the more responsible they will become, because they'll understand there's no judgment. Only.
Absolutely.
I want to ask Denage with that fabulous French name. Denage, tell me what your young people have been saying about access to care. The people you talk to, what are they saying? How do they view us having a policy that's comprehensive and integrative, especially integrative? Let me hear you, Denage.
Okay, well, firstly, I'd like to say that the spaces I've been in, the youths know that they have access to this space because we provide this space for them. So that's what YAM is about. That's a little introduction to YAM. We create these spaces and we let them know that this is your right and you have a right to exercise your right. However, in one of the WhatsApp chat groups, we had a discussion where the church was in disagreement to the bill that we were going to talk about. Not necessarily the youths. The youths obviously would be very receptive to it. However, it's more so the adult population. I think the youths are very into it, although not much know about it yet. So hopefully we can push this and get it done.
I want to jump in here. Doc, I want to jump in here. I have a couple questions I want to throw at Dr. Frame. And a lot was said. I listened intently. I made a few notes. And one of the things you mentioned, well, first, let me just backtrack a little bit. You mentioned multiple engagements with the stakeholders, which included our young people, adolescent. What kind of response did you get from those engagements?
So we had some small focus group type engagement, right? In addition to the larger engagements where we had a couple of adults. And so one of the things with adolescents is that usually when the adults are in the room, especially beyond a certain number, you don't get that level of openness, right? Because for them, the space is not safe. There's a lot of judgment and all of that. But when you get adolescents in a room by themselves, they open up. And so some of the things that they talked about, I think, and for me, it's not surprising, but similar to adults, they have the same concerns about the things that are problematic and affect adolescents, right? So they too have concerns about mental health in adolescents, how adolescents are coping, because a lot of them are not using good, positive coping mechanisms for the problems that they have. Now, when you talk to adults about mental health, in general, and particularly among adolescents, let's start with my mother, right? I can tell you, the first thing my mother would say, and that she has said to me when I was younger, what problems you could have, right?
So,
what kind of problems you can have?
So,
right? So it's like, what kind of problems you can have that could be stressing you out to the point where you have mental health problems. Right? And so it doesn't have to go as far as mental health problems. But if we talk about just coping, how do young people cope? So young people they smoke, they drink, in unhealthy amounts, they have unsafe sex and so on. As parts, and sometimes it's a response, right, to the things that are happening around them, and they have poor coping skills to use better and more positive coping mechanisms, right? And that gets them into trouble. So young people also have concerns about that because they see how a lot of young people are drinking a lot of alcohol, how they're using marijuana and other types of drugs and things of that nature, right? They also have concerns about, and this is one of my favorites, right? About what they eat. Because part of the problem is not just what they eat, but what they have access to eat. And so it's a bit of a cycle, right? You don't have access to a lot of healthy foods, affordable healthy foods, or you go into spaces, let's say you go to intercall or to primary school sports, or you go to a fete or wherever you go, right? And you have fried chicken and chips and barbecue, and they don't have healthy options around them. So they also have to eat that. When they're at school, a lot of young people talked about what they have access to eat at schools, right? That's problematic for them. They don't particularly want to eat a lot of these things, but that's what they have access to, right? And of course, the violence was something that they talked about and that they were concerned about, whether it's interpersonal violence, that causes young people to end up in fights, or just conflict resolution, being able to peacefully have a conversation. You can disagree, but it doesn't blow up, in a way that you have to react in a negative way, right? That is a concern for them, even in adolescent dating relationships, right? Physical abuse and those kinds of things were problems that the young people talked about. And of course, when we talked about sexual and reproductive health, young people had concerns about the kinds of information or lack of information that they were getting in the school setting, right? So there's a lot of emphasis on abstinence. There's a lot of emphasis on the biology and the reproductive system, but not enough emphasis on the sort of real world exposure and experiences that young people are having in terms of sex and sexuality, right? So, how to have relationships, healthy relationships, how to have safe sex, all of those kinds of things, right? How do you know, issues around consent? Just if you say yes to somebody and you go over to the house, or you, as we say, you're tipping a little thing on the side, right? Because your parents don't know and these kinds of things. How do you negotiate to do that in a safe way so that you don't come out on the wrong side of it in the morning, right?
And how do you know to make the choice?
Exactly.
Because there is a choice. You can choose to abstain, but you may feel pressured and you don't know how to do that. So either way, you're vulnerable because
you're vulnerable.
You don't know that you can choose because you have overcome the pressure, and then you don't know how to behave when you get into the circumstance. How to guard that control of yourself, that power that you should have. And that is why we need that kind of space.
Right. And then the other thing that was a big one, and that we've seen this over a number of years now, and I should have mentioned on the violence, is the bullying. Bullying, for me, that was a big surprise. The level, how much the young people talked about bullying. In the schools and so on. So this is among young people that's happening in the schools.
Okay, great. So look, so much has been said, and I'm trying to take it in stride so we can, get it out there. So what I'm getting, and what I think we all would agree, is that during that age, or during that period of life, adolescent, and Doc, you mentioned it's a period of exploration and all of that, and some risks are involved. And of course, once you are in an exploratory setting, or you are taking risks, danger is always lurking, which means that there must be some guardrails. All right. You also mentioned, some of the adolescents are making reference to things like violence and the bullying and all of that, which says to me that some level of guidance must be provided. All right. Now, you also mentioned earlier that adolescents tend to be a little less open when they are in a space with adults. Yeah. Now, if that's the case, hold on.
Intolerant adults, because when in a space that is felt safe, they open. Totally different thing.
So if we can agree that some kind of guidance must be provided, how do we? And of course, guidance would come with experience, which means that we now have to look to maybe some older people, to maybe use the experience and offer that as a way of guiding them. How do we then bridge that gap between our adolescents and people who are more experienced?
Want me to answer that, Sonia?
I would like Dinaj to take this one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to mention that the youths, especially in the youth advocacy movement, we just launched our new initiative called Sofa Talks, where we, the YAM, have been trained by other professionals to reach out, and I love this word, create a space for these youths to speak openly, voice their concerns. So they don't necessarily have to speak to the adults, but they have us as a means to rely on, where we provide a safe and honest response to their inquiries. Yeah. And it will be airing shortly, so stay tuned for that.
Okay, so we look forward to that. One other thing, Dr. Frame.
Godfrey, allow me to add
Sure.
to the noises, yeah? So in addition to the safe space conversations with adolescents, the other component of what the young people in the YAM are doing, they've initiated a set of conversations with the Parent Teachers Associations, right? Because what we know is that parents are ill-equipped to have these conversations with their children, with their young people, right? They didn't learn it in school. I don't know that they're learning it in church, and if so, not in many churches, right? So they don't have the tools of how to have these conversations, especially the more difficult conversations. I think everybody knows about the birds and the bees conversation, the birds and the bees talk, right? If you want to talk about sex, the worst thing to do is to put your child or your young person sit down to have that conversation. It should just be a natural part of the conversation. So I tell people, it comes up. You're watching a TV show, you're watching a movie, it comes up. Use the opportunity to explain what is happening, pros and the cons, whatever. What they should and shouldn't be doing, what the values of the family are, what your expectation as a parent is of what they should do, right? So I think engaging the parents is a key step, because we have to provide parents with the skills and the tools to comfortably engage. It's an uncomfortable topic for the adolescents as well, and probably even more uncomfortable for the parents. So we have to get parents at a place where they can speak about this and not lose their minds, essentially. So we're working with the YAM to create that space.
But I think it goes beyond that, because I think when you can instruct, because that's what those conversations are, they are instructive to parents, that young people are actually a tad equipped to be able to have these conversations among themselves, because that is what we want. If parents don't know, parents should be reinforcing. Okay, but young people keep conversations, and unfortunately, until we create that safe space, until we can create that space, it's most likely going to be adulterated information that is not clean, right? Even talking about sex, even talking about things like pornography, which is a big problem for adolescents. They don't understand the implications. They don't understand the devastation on the healthy sex life and all the rest. So if we can find them creating this space where they can discuss it and parents can understand, well, these young people do have an idea. And like we said, Godfrey, which you probably missed a little, the whole issue of having a clinical space where all of these things will happen. There's a clinic in Boston called Whittier House Health Center that has a male clinic that they call Man Cave, right? No women are allowed there. If you come and if a man comes into that, wants male health services, he goes into the man cave and a male will attend to him, because that is their space. In the same way, and the people who are there are not just only because they're male. They're educated, they're informed, they're prepared to help people to transit right through the whole whatever problem it is, in a confidential, in a complete, real, and instructive way. In the same way, creating that healthy space and using agencies like YAM and other agencies that will probably come up, even in the church, we can make adolescent life healthy, especially sexual and reproductive health, which continues to be the taboo. There's substance use, yes, but sexual and reproductive health must be. Guess what? All of us, there are 9 billion of us, and all of us come the same way, okay? So we must be able to tell our youth what are the challenges, how to remove the taboos, how to understand what is real, they can learn to make decisions. There's a no time and a yes time, and like Antonia started. If I were to say yes, is it a yes that I'm using informed consent to deal with? When I say yes, is it I do really want to say yes, or because I say it because Lord, well, I don't say yes, now I'm in trouble. Is that what it is? So we creating that safe adolescent health space means that we can empower young people to take care of their lives. We're going to talk, and we don't have a whole lot of time, but we need to talk about the law. But we must encourage our young people to trust themselves. We must develop systems that make sure that they have what they require to remain healthy. We're concerned. We talk about NCDs every day. I'm very concerned, right, about what our children eat. But they're not listening to me. I'm talking to old people. I'm talking to people who already have hypertension and diabetes. Coming to a place where it's their space, they can understand. Okay, so if I go to Intercall, they're only going to have X, Y, and Z. Guess what? I'm going to tell my principal, let's have a stall where we can sell fruit, vegetables, you understand? Sandwiches, something a little healthier. And we understand why those foods are needed. They're easier to prepare and you can make a faster money. But the bottom line is that if our young people are instructed, they're not buying them crap. They're not. Once they know they're not doing the stuff, you'll be surprised at how they behave differently. And so what we're trying to do is to globalize that kind of practice where our young people know, here are the health choices I must make when it comes to what I eat. How much exercise I must do, what my sexual health should be like, what if I have a problem. A child might have a problem with her period because she's had sex and she's scared and she's worried. Where does she go? Nothing happened to her. She just had an irregular period that she would have had anyway, even if she hadn't had sex. All of those things, or she might think she's pregnant. Where does she go to talk to make sure? Or does she go and get her friends to tell her what they do and next thing she ends up in a morgue? Those kind of stories we have to be able to eliminate from our history and to make sure that our young people can know that there is a system, there's a healthcare policy, a system that's implemented that makes me safe and keeps me healthy and makes me the best adult I can be. Within all the context of which family I live in, which community I live in, where I go to school, what is my state, what is my gender orientation, what is what I'm poor or I'm not poor, whatever my idiosyncrasies are, I should have equal, whether I'm disabled or not, that my access to proper healthcare as an adolescent must be free. There must be equitable system within which I can fit. And that is what we're aiming at through the implementation of this adolescent health policy. Question, Godfrey?
Dr. Freeman, I want to come back to you. I'm not finished with you yet. I still have a couple. I have to make up for all the times you've not been here. So earlier you mentioned the education system, and I want to. I'm focusing a bit more on the negative side of adolescence, but not in a negative way. I'm approaching it with the idea of with the hope that the policy will address some of the things that affect our young people and cause some of them to go the other way. All right, and I believe the education system is an area where we need to start, because especially dealing with the issue of violence, being able to exercise good judgment. I personally believe it has something to do with a certain level of education, a certain level of understanding. When we identify some of these issues that we have with our adolescents, how does the policy deal with it, or what is in there to help reverse that kind of thing that can cause our adolescents to go in the opposite direction?
Right. So one of the things that the policy addresses, one of the policy areas, is around positive development, right? And so when you talk about positive development, you're talking about an approach that is inclusive of the adolescent within the context of the school, the family, the community, and developing in a healthy way, taking into account a lot of the challenges that we experience as a society, including during emergencies and all of that. And so there is the need for strategies, or strategies have been proposed around upskilling the education sector, right, or teachers and so forth, so that they are able to respond, at least provide some kind of minimum response initially for adolescents, to get them to a point where they can help them to promote those positive behaviors, right? Whether it's through modeling, whether it's through the development of that kind of connection, where the people that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, they become trusted individuals in your lives, right? So including the communication between parents and the adolescents, helping teachers and so forth to develop skills in managing adolescents' behavior when they're, more on the difficult side, using those positive discipline techniques, and so on. So there are strategies that are proposed at the school level. I think one of the resources that we didn't have in my time in secondary school is that of the guidance counselors. I think that's a fantastic resources that schools have. But there's also the need to to strengthen that area and to build more trust between the adolescents and the students and those guidance counselors, because some of the same issues that we face with healthcare providers in your traditional health centers and so on, we've heard some of those complaints as well, in regards to the guidance counselors and so on, right? So of course it's not everyone, but there's room for scale up. And we know we're going to hear, okay, well, oh gosh, there's more work for teachers to do again, right? But it's not necessarily a call for more work. It's a call to rethink the way that we do what we currently do, right? So adapting and changing our strategies. I like to say, change is not always about money. It's not always about more money. Sometimes it's a change of mindset. It's a change of doing things a different way, a change of, working smarter and not harder kind of change, right? So that you use the same pot of funds that you've always used, but use it smarter. Because the pot of funds is not going to change, especially given this global climate. If that pot of funds change, it's likely to become a smaller pot of funds and not a larger pot of funds, right? So let's rethink how we do things. We have very capable teachers, but they need leadership. They need more capacity building.
More capacity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we have a good core group of people, and I know we've heard the praises that our teachers have gotten. Our education system has a lot going for it. The school is really a really good place to meet our young people, just because they spend so much time there.
Mm-hmm.
And even for health services as well, even the school. I mean, I know the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health has the Health Promoting Schools program or initiative. And so the school is a good place to meet our young people, expand the services that they access there, and really provide a wide range of services for young people.
I want to ask Dinaj about where she sees youth advocacy on its own, working within not only the health and they're on their own for the most part, but how does she think they can be integrated into a more structured health system and of course in the school? The
Very
noise.
interesting question. Yes, very interesting question. I believe that we can work with the schools itself. So as Dr. Frey mentioned, we have met with some of the PTA of some schools on the island. However, that was to do our sofa talks. But to have a more structured form, I think we can provide, okay, so for example, at the TAMCC level, we have a youth arm there. So there's a group of YAM based in TAMCC. So I'm thinking we can have a youth arm based in different schools, and you can have a youth coordinator for each school perhaps. And that way we have a direct link to each schools. If they have a question, they can contact us. A student has an issue, they can contact us. But we would have to obviously work through the government and partner with Ministry of Education and all of that, which we did to do the SOFA talks. So that's just an idea.
So where do you see yourself in the health sector specifically? Where do you think, where can you offer your services in the health sector to make this thing work? This big program, this big adolescent, this adolescent health service. What is YAM's role, or just youth advocacy in general?
Right. So, as the name suggests, we are advocates, not necessarily healthcare professionals. So we give advice, we distribute methods of protection. So we don't say go and have sex. We say, listen, if you're having sex, this is how to protect yourself, and these are the steps to take. And we just advocate for everyone that needs the advocation. Right. So to answer your question, I don't necessarily see ourselves in the health sector per se, but I do see us working, intertwining our advocacy skills with them. Right. As in the health sector.
Yeah. Remember, health in all policies. So whatever you're doing must include the health of the young people.
Dinaj, I want to ask you, Doc, just before you go, just while you're on that, you mentioned, working, you met with the PTA and working with schools. What about, we do have a significant amount of young people who are not in school, and I think this is where, we may see the problems, right? This is where the problems are. They're not in school, no education, you don't learn skills to deal with different things. How does your group, your movement, what are your plans to reach these people?
Right. So different strokes for different folks, and YAM is here to provide for everybody. So we do booths, not just at schools. We also set up in villages. So for example, we did some booths in Soter, some booths in St. George's, some booths in Caracou, to facilitate the ones that don't go to school and might have a question. They can feel free to say, hey, pull us aside. I have this question. I would like a condom, if possible. Miss, we do get a lot of those requests. So you don't necessarily have to go to school to reach our resources. And we also have an Instagram page, so some people reach us there as well, and we are very confidential with our information. So if we have a booth, we would announce it on Instagram so that the ones who are not in school can perhaps come out and ask questions and raise concerns.
Okay.
So, Godfrey, allow me to add as well. So, the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association has been making some strides in strengthening our response to adolescence. And one of the things, so it's really the broader phrase, that people use, so you can say adolescent-friendly services or adolescent-responsive services. And it's what we encourage the government to do, as well as is what is in the policy and is what GPP is working towards. And so the plan that we've had, that we've discussed with YAM and for YAM as how they can be involved in that is really seeing how they can be included as part of the clinic, right? So they do a lot of comprehensive sexuality education type work. And so what we're envisioning is that they can become part and parcel of our clinics, and adolescents who just want information and advice, that they're there. They may not come in for any contraceptives or anything of that nature. But what they do on the streets, in the schools, at carnival, at wherever, we now bring that into the clinic setting. And when they come, they don't necessarily have to see a doctor. They can have a conversation with a young person, and a referral can be made from the YAM member to the nurse or to the doctor or to a counselor if that is needed. So for us, it's a work in progress, but it's really about creating the space. We've, at the board level, we've already passed the policies to facilitate all of that, and we're working towards preparedness for implementation. And so it's one of the reasons why we have been engaging the parents, teachers associations, and the young people have been doing they did the sofa talks. And I mean, really, we are being led by the young people in this move, right? When they said they wanted to have this sofa talk initiative, we had to now hurry behind them to catch up, to make sure now that we have the policy in place to provide the services. And so for us, it was welcome news when we saw this last week, when we saw late last week, the news article about the move in the direction that government was moving, because my complaint has been, while our YAM members are out in the community providing information and education, there's a big gap. There's nowhere for the young people to go. They can't refer, can they? They can't comfortably and honestly say, okay, well, if you need services, if you need to see a doctor, you can go to the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association. Right? Or you can feel comfortable going to your local community health center. They couldn't honestly give that advice.
So, Dr. Right? Frame, so I want to stop it because I want you to get back comprehensive. Let's talk about implementation of this adolescent health policy, because we don't have a lot of time left.
Sure.
We don't have a lot of time left tonight. We can talk about this for a week without stopping.
Well, we can have them come back next week, Dr. Nixon, because we basically have not touched anything
tonight. I want to get this because we can. I'm going to use my favorite good name. We can expatiate next week. Hear me. What are the things necessary? What are the actions that are necessary? And we discussed it when we discussed on the policy. I just wanted to share with Grenada and the people listening, what are the actions necessary to ensure that we have a successful implementation of the adolescent health policy? Just the components.
Right. So I would start by saying, we need political action, right? So we've moved away from political will. We don't need political will, we need political action, right? And I think we're seeing some movement in terms of the political action, particularly as it relates to the age, amending the age at which adolescents can access sexual and reproductive health and rights services, right? And this is a really good move. But the big caveat is that we need this movement for all of the health issues that adolescents face. Adolescents should be able to access these health services without parental consent, right? At age 16, as the government is proposing, and at age 12, in good faith, as they're saying. The policy recommends age 10 because the age of adolescent is 10 to 19, right? And age 10 is important because we see a lot of things happening in adolescence, including sexual activity, that start before the age of 10. Right? So the policy is important. We need the policy and the legislation because it gives healthcare providers a level of confidence to be able to provide these services without saying, me, I can't give this child anything. She can't come and see the doctor. She can't see the nurse. We can't do anything for her because who you want your parents to come and cuss out? Right? I ain't not taking no blows from nobody. Right? So this is a reality.
So we're saying, because we need to make it very clear tonight.
Yes.
We're not giving adolescents permission to go and have sex willy-nilly or anything like that. We created a space by implementing this policy, and whatever legal changes are going to be made, amendments are going to be made. We're creating a space where adults can have a healthier life, can be responsible for some of the decisions they make, can be guided accordingly, that there can be appropriate health services, national insurance, that or actions are evidence-based. Whatever care they're getting is based on what every other adolescent gets in the bigger world. That we'll have a community that participates and that they can go into the community wherever health services are affordable and have their own adolescent clinics that give them the service they require. And that other thing, that substance abuse and mental health in particular will be taken care of, for want of a better word, at that level, right? So that all the what you'd have is comprehensive and integrative care of our adolescents in one space, and that works within a comfortable legal framework where they can go and access, and above all, where they can develop the confidence and the trust to ensure that they get the quality of care and that they get the care that they want. Because they were one will kill the next.
Dr. Nixon, I have a question from one of our listeners. Well, two questions. One is for Dr. Frame, the other is for Dinaj. So, Dr. Frame, we go with you first. So, our listener is asking, you mentioned discussions as a family about family values. As a parent, what are some of the values and or expectations do you recommend around the aspect of sexuality within the family, and why?
Right. That's an excellent question, right? But there isn't a one-size-fits-all to that question. Families are different. Families are made up differently. You have extended family, you have single parent family, and the single parent is not always the mother, right? But mostly the mother. You have your nuclear family, all that. So it really depends on the values of the family, right?
The cultural influences.
So you, whatever those values are, if your value is the value of your family is that you do not want your child to have sex before marriage, then be clear about that value and tell them such. But you do not, it doesn't mean that you tell them that and you don't tell them about how they can have a healthy relationship, what a healthy relationship look like. Tell them about how to have safe sex, because at some point in their lives, hopefully if your value is after marriage, at some point they're going to have sex, more than likely, and they will need to know how to protect themselves, right? Because they may not want to have children as soon as they get married. They may want to have some years to just enjoy being a pair, just a husband and a wife, right? So how do they protect themselves? But the reality is that, unbeknownst to you, they may have sex. They may decide to have sex for a number of different reasons. So you still need to let them know, right? If the value is that once you think they are responsible enough and they can handle the responsibility of being in a relationship and having sex, right? You tell them that. So it really depends on what the value is of the family.
The individual family.
Of the individual family. And there is no right or wrong on that. No, some people may say I'm wrong on that. But who am I to dictate to Godfrey's household what his value should be and what he should tell his children, both his son and his daughter, Godfrey, if you have those, what they should do in terms of sex. But this is not just about sex. There should also be values about smoking and drinking, right? There should be values around what time you should come home. There should be values around how you should be dressed. There should be values around how you should treat people, right? Including people within your household and all of that.
So quickly before hold on, Dr. Nixon, quickly. We have another question. Let's take the question from the listeners. Then I just want it for you. Are there also strong efforts by YAM to encourage abstinence, since abstinence is the only 100% safety method? If yes, can you share what has been done in that area thus far?
Of course. So back to the SOFA Toxins, that was our most recent initiative and our most impactful one, because we got to speak directly to the youths, and it will be streamed for all the youths, island-wide, nationwide, internationally to see. We did mention and speak on abstinence, and our biggest, we had a whole session on managing peer pressure, managing your sex life, and our takeaway was that say no. If you don't want to do it, say no, don't do it, abstain. We even have signs in the office that mentions abstinence, since it is the 100% not getting pregnant, no kids. So yes, we do speak on abstinence, and we do advocate for abstinence, of course.
All right. Well, I trust that the listener understands, and that satisfies. If not, of course, you can always post another question. But we basically out of time. So 3 minutes just to wrap, and so then I'll just start with you. Your closing remarks.
Well, I can say this much. I do believe that this initiative is a good one, because we're allowing adolescents to have access to sexual and reproductive rights. And it is a necessary, and it is also a progressive step for Grenada. It's about empowering our young people with information, the support, the access, and the care that, okay, if they find themselves in a crisis, they have an alternative. They have someone that they can go to that is reliable, someone that won't go and tell their neighbor, or, okay, you come in the office for, let's say you come in the office to find out about an STI, and you go, your mother calling you, why are you in the office? Why are you at GBPA? I heard from such and such. We don't want that anymore. So we want to create this safe space for our adolescents so that we can prioritize their health, their safety, and also their dignity.
Thank you. Dr. Frame?
Thank you, Godfrey. So I would like to end by just sharing a little bit of additional information. But to start by saying, congratulations in advance to the current government, because we on the ground, as people who work in this area of sexual and reproductive health and rights, we have been advocating for this for many, many, many years. I've been doing this work for over 20 years now. And this is the first time that we've had some movement at this level. The current law as it stands creates a lot of problems, but ultimately it prevents adolescents from accessing much needed services, right? To address the issue of teenage pregnancy that we have in our country, to address issues of STIs among adolescents and so on. Right. And just to give you share a little bit of data, I've been involved in some research across some Caribbean countries, Antigua, Dominica, Guyana, over the last few years. And one of the things that we found is that by age 16 and 17, 40% of teenage girls had experienced sexual activity, and for nearly half of them, their first pregnancy had already ended at that age. So think about what that means, right, in terms of having access to services. More importantly, at that same age, only 2% of them attended public health clinics. Only 2%. So it tells us that we have young people who are sexually active, 40% based on the data in these other countries, but only 2% of them have access to spaces that can help them, whether it's through the provision of information or contraceptives that could have prevented those pregnancies. And so Grenada is at a crossroads where we have a real opportunity to put a dent in this, and I'm interested over the next 2 years to monitor the progress that if we take action following the amendment that is planned in terms of giving adolescents access to the services. If parents do their part, come to the Grenada Planned Parenthood Association if you have concerns. Come to us if you want to sit down with your adolescents and have a conversation. We can help you to facilitate those conversations, those uncomfortable conversations. But I think we really have an opportunity to do something important at a time in the lives of our adolescents when they experience some angst, some difficulties, they're trying to find themselves, and what they need more than anything else is a place to feel safe and people to feel connected with and to. And so, again, I really encourage the population to not use this opportunity as one of division, and instead use it as one where we can make some positive strides forward and really reduce some of the barriers that have held back our adolescents and have really caused them and our country some problems in terms of their health.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frame. But I let me before Dr. Nixon come in, I do believe we need to continue that discussion because we have not even gone through. I would like to hear, what the present law speaks of, and how the new policy is going to help fix it and create that space and these opportunities for our adolescents. So I'm inviting both yourself and Dinaj and maybe other persons from your organization to be present so we can continue that discussion and put the information out there. So I want you to tell me yes on the air so that everybody can hear. That way you can't.
Accepted. Invitation accepted, Godfrey.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for the extended invitation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nixon. I know there is so much to say, but we can only say so much in so much time. So your closing.
So Sophia, I do agree that this is the tip of the iceberg. But I think more than that, I think this is getting ostrich's head out of the ground. There's so much we have to learn. I think it's important that we have a comprehensive, integrative adolescent health policy that I think, yes, does need to to modify its legal framework within which it functions, and not just for sexual and reproductive health, but for other things as well. Because we are going to have to create that space. And I think the public, I really wish that John Public would participate, learn more about what this adolescent health policy is, look at what the law is to change in relation to sexual and reproductive health. Because sexual and reproductive health is a very important component of adolescent life. Okay, we're not pushing for children to be sexually active. I remember as a teenager when contraceptive became available, everybody thought if you told a child to take contraceptive, you tell them to have sex. No, the bottom line is that a lot of kids were having sex, and offering contraceptive was a means of ensuring that they didn't get pregnant. But I see the outlook in a much more specific. There are more specific ways, constructs that we approach in order to ensure that adolescent health is fine. In the past, when we spoke of adolescent, we only spoke of adolescent sexual health, but we're talking about mental health, we're talking about physical health, we're talking about preventing diseases, we talk about giving adolescents a chance to get to include everybody. Listen. Children who have disabilities are often sexually involved. They're also going to need support. What I'm saying is that it is important that we as a population ensure that this government that is probably going to take this initiative to change the law to facilitate adolescent access. There must be access to something that is really very good. That is what I would like to see, that all aspects of adolescent health care are provided in a primary care sector, not necessarily just a community health center, but all physicians understand that there are services that this group of a population that has been grossly overlooked for too long and become dysfunctional. They end up being alcoholics. They end up having 6 children, no education, and all the rest of it. That this group of a population that is so precious and so viable and so, with such great potential are looked at, and that health services are provided that are tailored to suit the needs of every single adolescent in our population. And we talk about the rest another time.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Frame, thank you for accepting the invitation. We thank you so much. Dinaj, thank you for being here. It's quite happy to have you. And of course, Dr. Nixon, you're always here with us. Thank you so much. We look forward to continuing this discussion next Tuesday right here on GBN TV and K105 FM. Thank you also very much, and do have a good night. All the best.